Wrangler, have you ever thought about doing it so the bit shifting, so you can set it to 4 bits or 8 bits, or so there'll be a user selectable amount of it being used, or is it not that easy to implement?
Yeah, but that is interesting because that when you start to design something like this, then suddenly you realize that there is certain limitations,
Okay.
like which basically have to do with money. If there is an unlimited budget, and the people that really want to buy these systems from you are just filthy rich and really don't care about any money, there's no limits to what you can
Then
do.
you could do it.
Then if people want to, I can make this even with golden knobs with diamonds on it, But the thing actually is that there's a couple of limitations that are very clear. One is board space on the circuit boards. You just have a specific amount of board space on the circuit boards that can only house so and so much electronics. This also can house only so and so much functions. Basically, what I try to do is because all this stuff is built by hand. Even the circuit boards are etched by hand. Then they are drilled with a little cut machine. There's my colleague Richard and me. We are building this stuff together, and we make the front panels by hand. Everything we do ourselves. And so, if I design these circuit boards, I've tried to find the best balance between the amount of knobs that can be on the module, which basically is 8 in this particular size, and the amount of electronics that I can put on a circuit board that fits behind that size. And that means that you have to do compromises. You have to decide which functions are more important than other functions. And to do that, of course, you need to have some sort of a philosophy behind it. And sometimes, you have this saying that says, "Jack of all trades, but master of none." If you try to really max out all the possibilities, then you have the risk of ending up with a jack of all trades, but master of none. And I rather make a master of one or two things and skip some other things, just to make that what it has, it works really good. So if you have this Wrangler, actually, if you listen to the difference between maybe using a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, or a 6-bit DA converter to create the step pattern, it's if you can do with 4 bits, you can do with 3 bits, you can do with 5 bits. It doesn't really it doesn't really pay off to.
The repeating pattern bit of it really was what I would like to alter. So instead of doing the 32, you could say I'll repeat to 4.
Yeah, well, the
No, I think 32 is too complex for the mind, maybe also.
well, the idea is not, it is if you use this as a note sequencer to play notes.
That's the way I'm thinking.
It invariably does not come up with the pattern that you have in the melody that you have in your mind. So it's not really meant to. It can play melodies at random, basically, but because it is unpredictable what sort of melody it's gonna play, it's not really meant for melodies. It's meant for modulation patterns.
Yeah.
And so basically these days you get your melody from your computer sequencer, your sequencer program in the computer that produces MIDI, and you go to a MIDI to CV interface that plays this. And but the thing is that the big disadvantage of programming sequencers on a computer is that they don't really produce a lot of variation.
Right. Which is what I liked when you were changing it back.
Yeah.
Change it back, change it back, change it back.
Yeah.
And
And
I was wondering if it would say A, you could
yeah.
like that.
Myself, I
Then I
wouldn't.
could have a
Yeah.
memory button that I could store it in.
Yeah, yeah. But it's a chaotic system, and chaotic systems don't really work well with memory buttons. They can say, well, I can go from I got 1,000 balanced states,
Yeah,
and
you
I
need
can
a lot
go
of
into get stuck into 1,000 different balanced states, but it's unpredictable which state I will be in. So yeah, that's the thing. You have to make compromises and you have to make choices. The basically the step signal from the wrangler, you can clock it from an external clock so that it can clock on every note, and then you use it to control a filter effect or some dynamic effect or whatever, and and get your notes from your.
Because the thing I like about that one is it can be seen as many different things. I quite liked it as an oscillator.
Yep.
It sounds really good as an oscillator, I thought.
Yeah, yeah. Like if you're
Not just
into
a noise module.
yeah,
Or
if you're
chaotic
into
noise,
soundscapes
yeah.
or
Quite
drones or kind of that thing, or really like to improvise with electronic sounds, then it's yeah, because then you don't care about melody
no.
and harmony.
And the other one, more towards melody and harmony, with the quantizer, normally I would imagine a quantizer would have so you've got the scale and a key.
Mm.
How does that work in there? It's just a scale,
Yeah.
no key or...
No, because this quantizer works like this. Is you got basically it accepts a voltage between plus and minus 5 volt, and it sees that as a 10 octave range.
Okay.
Then you can choose a scale, and it will force the input value into that scale.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to transpose that scale to another key, you just add a keyboard voltage later.
So you take that, you'd maybe use your offset thing in there.
Yeah, and if you use the offset before you quantize, you basically stay in the same scale, the same key, and you go up and down. But because you can control the key from a keyboard later, after the quantizer, it doesn't really pay to have one here.
Okay.
But we have an extra input, which is a transpose input, and the idea is basically that if you have a 1 volt octave analog keyboard, which is not really in tune, but almost in tune, but not enough to actually play one of your analog synthesizers, you can put it in here because it will also quantize the transpose input, always in a 12 note octave scale, and it will add it to the quantized note.
Okay.
So basically, if you if you have a sequencer from an analog sequencer, if you put it into the quantizer, the sequence gets quantized into exact note values and also into a particular scale. Now, if you then connect the keyboard to the transpose input, it will transpose the sequence, but it will stay in the scale.
Yeah. Okay.
And then, so if you don't use the quantizer and only the transpose input and play on the keyboard, you will just track the keyboard, but it will the quantizer will correct it to the proper voltage levels to get your slightly out of tune analog keyboard back into tune. And that saves you the trouble of having to retune your old analog keyboard. So basically you can do all the tricks with it. And the outputs are also between plus and minus 5 volts, so it's 10 octaves, 5 octaves up and 5 octaves down.
It does only quantize positive voltages.
No, positive and negative.
And negative. Okay.
Yeah, between minus 5 volt and plus 5 volt, so over 10 octaves.
That's really
10
awesome.
octave input and 10 octave output.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's the first quantizer I heard of which does negative voltages.
Yeah, well, actually, it's quite logical to do it that way because
Yeah.
you play around a certain note, and if you just say that if middle C is 0 volt, you know, and minus 1 volt is 1 octave below middle C, you know, then yeah,
Okay, great.
you choose basically the frequency that you choose on your oscillator. That is your reference.
Yeah.
You know, you would sort of set it to middle C,
Yeah.
and then go up and down. You know, and then you can easily, or to a 440 or something, you know, that you can easily tune it to another instrument. Basically, if if it would be positive only, you would have to go to the lowest frequency that you can play.
Yeah.
But mostly, if you tune it exactly on the lowest notes, it's mostly the highest notes are slightly out of tune.
Yeah.
You know, you would rather sort of tune it to a very high note and then go lower, because you hear it much better if a high note is out of tune than a bass note. You know, so yeah, you need that negative range
Yeah.
in a quantizer.
I'm really sure about that. Yeah, great.
I've got another question. Do you see this setup you've got in this box now as a good ideal setup for this amount of space? Is there anything that you would think of doing differently, or?
Well, it depends a little bit on what people want. Like for instance, there is just many people that just simply want a good and flexible analog voice to do their bass track, or to do some weird analog effects track or something, and combine that with all their other stuff that they have into their digital audio workstation, or Logic, or Ableton, or Cubase, or whatever they use. And then basically you could have like this set of 3 modules, because then you have a oscillator, envelope generator, filter, and you would sequence it from your computer with a MIDI to CV box, and you got a very good analog voice with very flexible kind of sound things that can do snappy basses and stuff. If you want more like the traditional 2 or 3 oscillator keyboard sounds and a very spacious kind of stuff, you need more oscillators, and you would go to maybe 2 sets of these, because then you would also have the LFOs to sort of modulate your timbre, etc., etc. If you're really into sort of experimental electronic kind of stuff, there some people say, well, just give me a Wrangler, a mini matrix, and a note processor module, and maybe a triple LFO and 1 oscillator, and I just go sit on stage and I can make all these weird sounds with that, and that's enough for me. There's some other modules that are not in this system. Yeah, it depends on what people want, and some people just want to play with 2 or 3 modules, and others want to play with 50 modules.
Why you have got this as your setup? Why you think this is a?
Because this is basically a demo system.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there are more models available.
Yeah, we got we have the dual phaser, the phaser filter. There's some more stuff coming up this year.
Okay.
So yeah, and it's there's no reason why I should stop developing new modules.
No.
Oh, I agree totally. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, so.
What's the price for a 3 units panel approximate?
Just from a panel like this.
Yeah.
Well, basically, there's the price list, the official price list, and oscillator is 325 euros. The dual envelope generator is 295 euros, and the 24 dB filter with VCA is 325, so that's 650. It's 945 euros for a panel like this.
Yeah.
Or a panel like this, because it's also 325. Actually, these are also to 325 and 295, so this is also so mostly panels are 945 euros,
Yeah.
and this one is 735 if I'm correct from my head.
Okay.
And so basically, if people want to have a smaller or bigger system like this, I always recommend to use our own power supplies, because these are very lightweight, green, very modern, very reliable power supplies that are also used in the equipment that they use in operation rooms in hospitals where lives depend on it. So we found out that they're lightweight, they don't generate heat, they work all over the world without any problem, and I can guarantee absolutely that everything will work with these power supplies, and they are also dirt cheap compared to the big analog transformer power supplies. And it can give you a reasonably portable, well, let's say transportable system. And then I can make frames that hold the modules. So basically, if you would like to have a system, you can start with a frame and a power supply and a power distribution board and cables. And these frames can be any size, from only one module up to let's say 9 modules wide and 3 modules high or something. But up to the size of 2 rows by 7 modules, so that's a 40 module system. It's a fixed price. It's 175 euros for the frame and the power supply and the power distribution board. So people can, and these frames hold these modules, and you can just slide it into a wooden cabinet. So it's easy to make your own wooden cabinet and just slide these frames with modules in there, and then you can also choose to have your cabinet maybe 3 modules wide or 5 modules wide or 9 modules wide. Very convenient way, and that way you can these power supplies can power up to like 16 modules. So for up to a 14 module system, you can just do with one frame with one power supply for the total price 175 euro, and then start putting in the modules that you want. Because we cannot guarantee that the modules work with every other system that's available in the world, because we use our own power regulators in every module. Most modules have their own power regulators that sort of input any voltage between 12 and 15 volt and convert it into a stable voltage that they use internally. So we can actually trim the modules to this particular voltage, so we don't have to retrim them if they are put in another system. But especially big systems, they sometimes have problems with that. For instance, the negative voltage comes on much earlier than the positive voltage, and that can sort of refuse the power regulators that are in the modules can sort of get a little bit confused about that, like, oh, I only got half of the power supply that I actually expect. Oh, let's go into short circuit protection mode or something, and that means that sometimes you would have to power up your system 3 or 4 times before everything would work. And that's of course not really nice. So, but by using one of our cheap but very reliable power supplies, even as a second power supply, you have no problem with that. It just simply works.
What's the standard gate voltage on this then?
Anything between 100 millivolts and 15 volts. So it triggers at it's got a small hysteresis between 100 millivolt and 120 millivolts. So when it's sort of plus minus 10. So basically it has to go beyond 120 millivolts and then drop down to less than 100 millivolts to go off.
How should people contact you?
RHORDIJK at accessforall.com, or just Google Rob Hordijk.
Okay.
Then most probably you will come up
Put that on the video.
because we have no website because we do most of our business from mouth to mouth. People get stuff from us, and they musicians, and they start to play with it, and their fellow musicians, they see it and try it out and think, okay, this is nice, I would like to have it too, and then they just get the email address from the other guys, and that's how they come at our place. And because we are as boutique can get, because everything is built by hand, you know, we don't do mass production, so we could not sort of like have a website and this month we release this new product and then take 500 orders and then be crazy for the rest of the year. You know, it's we like to have the personal approach with people that want to work, make music with our stuff, and
Okay.
like a violin builder or somebody who builds custom
Like
guitars,
your biggest
or
Darius of Modular.
He is.
I don't know.
Oh,
You
yeah,
know,
he
it's
is, yeah, thank you.
Can you
there's
get
many
it?
other people that are also making things, and it's not. We're not like trying to compete with big names like Moog or Book. Like we just do our own stuff, have our own ideas, take our own approach, and if people like to work with those ideas, those approaches, those philosophies, then they're very welcome. And if they would like to work in different ways than we do, then it's fine by us as well. You know, it's all about making music. It's in the end, music is just entertainment. It's just to make us feel good, and that's the thing. You know, we say we're in the business of making people happy.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
just build us some goods.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Nice one, Rob. Cheers.
Okay.